The city of Seattle stretched below Sam like a living map. From his perch high above, on the roof of an old building, he could see the skyline, tall towers glinting in the sunlight, streets buzzing with cars, and people moving through their daily routines. To most, the world was loud and busy, full of endless tasks and responsibilities. But to Sam, it was silent. He stood there unseen, feeling the light breeze as he observed the city in its constant flow. Sam wasn't like the people below. He was an angel, a silent observer whose job was to watch over humans. His role was simple. He guided lost souls and brought comfort to those in pain. He moved through the city, invisible, unnoticed, like a soft whisper in the wind. Sam had been doing this for longer than he could remember. He had seen thousands of lives unfold, but there was always a distance. He could not interfere, could not feel what humans felt: love, fear, joy, or sorrow. Today was no different, or so he thought. The city was waking up to a new day. Sam floated down from his rooftop and began his usual routine, walking through the park where people jogged, strolled, and laughed with friends. He passed by unnoticed, like a shadow in the early morning light. As he crossed the street near a hospital, something caught his eye. Inside, through the large glass windows of the hospital, Sam saw her, Emily. She was a doctor, focused and determined as she rushed down the hall, her white coat fluttering behind her. She was heading toward the emergency room where a patient had been brought in on a stretcher. Sam hovered near the entrance, curious but calm. He had seen many doctors before, but something about Emily made him pause. There was a warmth in her that seemed to light up the room, a determination that radiated through her every move. Inside, the situation was tense. A man lay on the hospital bed, struggling to breathe. Machines beeped loudly as nurses worked quickly. But all eyes were on Emily. She moved with purpose, her hands steady as she gave orders to her team. "Prepare for intubation," she said calmly, her voice a steady force in the chaos. The nurses moved into action, following her lead. Sam watched closely, intrigued by the way Emily handled the situation. She wasn't just performing a job. She was fighting for this man's life. Her eyes were sharp, filled with focus, but beneath that, there was something more. Something that Sam had rarely seen in others. It wasn't just her skill as a doctor that impressed him. It was the compassion she showed. When the patient's heart monitor began to flatline, she didn't panic. Instead, she worked even faster, her hands moving as if they knew exactly what to do. "Clear," Emily shouted, and the nurse handed her the defibrillator. With a firm press, she delivered the shock. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Sam could feel the tension in the room, as if the whole world was holding its breath. Then the patient's heart monitor beeped again. Slow at first, but steady. The man was alive. Emily sighed in relief, her shoulders relaxing. She placed a hand on the patient's arm, her touch gentle now, as if offering comfort through her fingertips. "You're going to be okay," she whispered softly, though the man was still unconscious. It was a small moment, one of many in her day, but to Sam it felt monumental. He had never seen a human care so deeply, so openly. As Emily left the room, Sam followed her, his curiosity growing. He couldn't explain why, but something about her drew him in. She was different from the others he had observed. It wasn't just her skill or her compassion. It was the way she carried herself, like she was fighting not just for her patients, but for something larger, something deeper. Sam watched as Emily sat down in the hospital's break room, taking a moment for herself. She looked tired, but there was a quiet strength in her. As she sipped from her cup of coffee, staring out of the window at the world beyond, Sam couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to feel what she felt. He had watched humans for so long, but they had always been distant, their emotions just stories to him. But now, for the first time, Sam wanted more than just to observe. He wanted to understand. And in that moment, as he watched Emily, he realized something was changing within him. For the first time in his long existence, Sam felt a pull, a desire to step closer to the world he had only ever watched from afar. Something in the human world was calling to him, and her name was Emily. The days began to blur together for Sam as he found himself drawn back to the hospital again and again. What had once been just another place in the vast city of Seattle now felt like the center of his world. He didn't understand why, but every time he saw Emily, it was as if the noise of the world quieted, and only she remained. He continued his role as a silent observer, drifting through the hospital halls like a ghost, unseen and unheard. But Emily was always in his sight. At first, Sam told himself that he was simply doing his duty. He was an angel, after all, tasked with watching over the human world. But deep down, he knew this was different. He wasn't there to guide souls or bring comfort to the suffering. He was there for her. Each day, he watched as Emily moved through the hospital, caring for her patients with the same strength and compassion he had witnessed the first time he saw her. She smiled at her colleagues, offered words of comfort to worried families, and worked long hours without complaint. But Sam noticed something else now. Behind her bright eyes and confident demeanor, there was a sadness, one she kept hidden from everyone around her. Sam would follow Emily outside during her breaks, always keeping his distance. She often walked to a small garden behind the hospital, where she would sit on a bench, alone with her thoughts. Sam would stand nearby, invisible, listening to the quiet moments she spent with herself. One afternoon, as Emily sat on the bench, the autumn leaves swirling around her feet, Sam heard her speak, though no one was there to hear her. "I wonder if this is it," she whispered, looking up at the gray sky. "Is this what life is supposed to be? Saving lives, making a difference, but always feeling alone?" Her words lingered in the air, and Sam felt a strange ache inside him. He had never felt loneliness before. Angels weren't meant to feel such things, but hearing Emily voice her thoughts, her quiet doubts, made him question everything he thought he knew. How could someone who was so admired, so successful, feel so isolated? The next day, Emily walked to the hospital's rooftop during her lunch break. It was a quiet place, high above the noise of the city. Sam followed her there, floating beside her as she leaned on the edge of the roof, looking out over Seattle. The wind tugged at her hair, and Sam watched as she closed her eyes, taking a deep breath as if she could inhale some kind of peace from the air. "Some days I just wish I could disappear," she said softly to herself, her voice barely audible over the wind. "Just vanish for a while. No patience, no responsibilities, no one depending on me." Sam stood beside her, feeling a wave of emotions he didn't understand. Emily was surrounded by people every day, her patients, her colleagues, but she felt as if she was alone. Sam had been watching humans for so long, but never before had he felt this close to one of them. Her thoughts, her doubts, her loneliness, they made her seem so real to him, so human. The more Sam listened, the more he began to wonder about the world he had always observed from a distance. He had seen humans experience joy, sadness, love, and fear, but he had never truly understood it. Now, with Emily, he found himself wanting to feel those things. He wanted to know what it was like to be human, to have connections, to experience emotions that were so deep they could change the course of a person's life. As the days passed, the invisible connection between Sam and Emily grew stronger. Sam knew she couldn't see him, but he felt as if he was learning more about her with each passing day. He began to anticipate her moods, the way she would retreat into herself after a particularly difficult surgery, or the way she smiled faintly when she thought about something that made her happy, even if it was just for a moment. One evening, Sam followed Emily as she left the hospital after a long shift. The sky was dark, and the rain had just begun to fall, lightly at first, then heavier as she walked through the city streets. Emily pulled her coat tighter around herself, her hair damp from the rain. She walked slowly, lost in thought, her footsteps echoing in the quiet. Sam floated beside her, wishing he could speak to her, wishing he could tell her she wasn't alone. But he couldn't. He could only listen, as he always had. When Emily finally reached her small apartment, she paused at the door, staring at the handle for a long moment before going inside. Sam lingered by the window, watching her move through the empty rooms. She set her bag down, changed into more comfortable clothes, and sat by the window, looking out at the rain as it tapped against the glass. "I wonder what it would be like to love someone," she murmured to herself, her voice soft and full of longing. "To really love someone who sees you, who understands you." Sam felt a strange pull in his chest, a longing that echoed her words. He had never thought about love before, not in the way humans did, but now, standing outside her window, watching her eyes fill with quiet sadness, he began to wonder. What would it be like to love someone like Emily? What would it be like to feel that kind of connection, the way humans did? The rain fell harder, but Sam didn't move. He stayed there watching her, his invisible heart full of questions he didn't yet know how to answer. It was a cool autumn evening, and the park was quiet except for the soft rustling of leaves and the distant hum of the city. Emily had finished another long day at the hospital and found herself wandering through the park, her thoughts heavy. The streetlights cast long, dim shadows on the path, and the crisp air smelled of earth and rain. Emily often came here when she needed to think, but tonight the weight of her loneliness felt especially strong. She walked slowly, her hands tucked into her coat pockets, her mind drifting to her patients, her work, and the endless questions that seemed to follow her wherever she went. Was she making a difference? Was this the life she was meant to live? The questions circled in her mind, leaving her feeling both empty and exhausted. As she neared a small clearing in the park, Emily suddenly stopped. She wasn't sure why, but something felt different. The air seemed to shift, and she sensed a presence nearby. Her eyes scanned the area, but there was no one in sight. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her. "Hello?" she called out, her voice tentative. There was no response, only the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. But Emily didn't move. She stood there, her heart beating a little faster, unsure of what she was waiting for. And then out of the shadows, a figure appeared. At first she could barely make him out, a tall man standing just beyond the reach of the streetlight. He stepped forward slowly, his expression calm, almost serene. He was dressed simply, in dark clothes that seemed to blend into the night, but his eyes were bright, watching her with an intensity that made her pause. "I didn't mean to startle you," the man said softly, his voice deep and soothing. "I was just passing through." Emily blinked, her confusion giving way to curiosity. "Who are you?" she asked, taking a cautious step forward. The man smiled, though it was a small, almost sad smile. "My name is Sam," he said. "I'm a traveler. I've been wandering for a long time." Emily studied him for a moment. There was something different about him, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. He didn't seem dangerous, but there was an air of mystery around him, like he didn't belong to this world. And yet, there was also something oddly familiar about him, as if she had seen him before, even though she knew she hadn't. "A traveler?" she repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Where are you traveling from?" Sam hesitated for just a moment, then shrugged. "From many places," he said cryptically. "I've seen a lot of the world, and a lot of people." Emily's curiosity deepened. There was something about this man, about the way he spoke, the way he looked at her, that made her want to know more. It was as if he understood something about life that she had yet to discover. "And what brings you here, Sam?" Emily asked, her voice softening as she took another step closer. Sam looked up at the sky for a moment, as if searching for the right words. "I've been watching this city for a while," he said slowly. "Watching people live their lives, making choices, facing challenges. And then I saw you." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "Me?" she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. Sam nodded. "You seem different. You care so much about the people around you, but you're also searching for something. Something more." Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. How could he know that? She had never spoken those thoughts out loud. But here was this stranger, this traveler, speaking the very words that had been echoing in her mind for so long. "I'm a doctor," she said, as if that explained everything. "I try to help people." "I know," Sam said quietly, his eyes softening. "I've seen you." Emily's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean?" Sam smiled again, that same small, sad smile. "I've watched you work. You save lives every day, but you're still searching for something. I can see it in your eyes." Emily stared at him, unsure of how to respond. She didn't know whether to feel frightened or comforted by his words. Part of her wanted to walk away, but another part of her, perhaps the loneliest part, wanted to stay and keep talking to this strange, mysterious man who seemed to know her better than she knew herself. They stood in silence for a moment, the night air growing colder around them. Finally, Emily spoke, her voice quieter now. "Why do you say I'm searching for something?" Sam hesitated, then took a deep breath. "Because I've been searching too," he admitted. "I've spent a long time watching people, trying to understand what it means to be human, But no matter how much I watch, I can't really know. Not until I feel it for myself. Emily frowned, confused. Feel what? Love, joy, pain, everything, Sam said, his voice filled with longing. The things that make life real. Emily felt her chest tighten. She didn't know why, but his words touched something deep inside her, something she had been trying to ignore for so long. And have you found it? She asked quietly. Sam looked at her, his eyes searching hers. I think I'm starting to. For a moment, they just stood there, the distance between them feeling smaller with every passing second. Emily wasn't sure what was happening, but she knew one thing. She wanted to see Sam again. There was something about him, something she couldn't explain, but also couldn't deny. He understood her in a way no one else did, and she wasn't ready to let that go. I walk through this park almost every evening, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. If you're still traveling, maybe we'll see each other again. Sam's expression softened, and he nodded. I'd like that. With one last glance, Emily turned and began walking back down the path, her heart racing in her chest. As she walked away, she couldn't help but feel as if something important had just begun. And Sam, standing there in the shadows, watched her disappear into the night. For the first time in his long existence, he felt something new. A connection, a spark. He knew he had crossed a line by making himself visible to her, but he didn't regret it. Something inside him was changing, and for the first time, Sam wanted to know where it would lead. The nights in Seattle had always seemed peaceful to Sam, but now they felt different, quieter but filled with an unfamiliar tension. Since the night he revealed himself to Emily, something had shifted inside him. For the first time in his eternal existence, he wasn't satisfied just watching from the sidelines. He wanted more. Each evening, Sam met Emily in the park, and with each conversation, the invisible wall that had always separated him from the human world seemed to crumble a little further. They talked about everything, her work, her dreams, the things that kept her awake at night, and Sam listened, soaking in every word, every emotion that laced her voice. The more time he spent with her, the more he longed to understand what it truly meant to feel. But with that longing came a deep conflict. Sam was an angel. He had a duty to fulfill, a role that required him to stay apart from the human world. His purpose was to guide, to protect, not to live. Yet every moment with Emily made him question that purpose. What good was watching life unfold if he couldn't experience it for himself? One evening, after Emily had left the park, Sam found himself standing on the edge of the city's tallest building, staring out at the sea of lights below. The wind whipped around him, but he didn't feel it. He was a silent observer once again, floating above the world he was beginning to crave. As he stood there, lost in thought, another presence appeared beside him. It was Gabriel, an angel Sam had known for centuries. Gabriel had always been wise, calm, and steady, qualities Sam admired but couldn't relate to at that moment. You've been spending a lot of time with her, Gabriel said, his voice soft but direct. Sam didn't turn to face him. I have, Gabriel sighed, stepping closer to the edge. You're starting to question your role, aren't you? Sam remained silent, but the answer was clear. He had been questioning everything since the night he first spoke to Emily. There's nothing wrong with feeling curious about humans, Gabriel continued. But you know we're not meant to live among them. We're here to watch, to guide. Sam finally turned to look at him. But why? Why are we meant to stay apart? How can we truly guide them if we don't understand what it's like to be them? Gabriel's eyes softened, but there was sadness in them. Because that's the way it's always been. We have our place, and they have theirs. Sam's gaze drifted back to the city below. He had accepted that answer for centuries, but now it wasn't enough. Not anymore. There is a way, you know, Gabriel said quietly, his voice almost a whisper. A way for you to live as one of them. Sam's heart, or whatever it was that filled the space where his heart would be, skipped. He turned sharply toward Gabriel, searching his face for an answer. How? Gabriel looked at him with a mixture of understanding and sorrow. You can fall, Sam. You can become human, but it comes at a cost. Sam stepped closer, his curiosity burning inside him. What cost? You'll lose your immortality, Gabriel said. You'll feel everything humans feel. Love, joy, pain, suffering. You'll live a life just like theirs, but you won't be able to return. Once you choose their world, you leave ours behind forever." Sam felt a chill run through him, something he had never experienced before. The idea of becoming human, of feeling everything he had only watched from a distance, was both thrilling and terrifying. He would no longer be invincible, no longer an eternal being. He would be vulnerable, fragile, but he would also be able to love. He would be able to hold Emily, to be with her in a way that wasn't just from afar. "And what happens if I don't?" Sam asked, though he already knew the answer. Gabriel's gaze hardened slightly. "Then you remain as you are, an angel, eternal, but forever separated from the human world. You will continue to watch over her, but never truly be a part of her life. You will remain an observer." Sam's mind spun with the weight of the decision before him. Could he give up his immortality? Could he sacrifice the eternity he had always known for a brief life filled with love and loss? He thought about Emily, the way her eyes sparkled when she spoke about her patients, the way her smile lit up the darkest corners of his world. Could he live knowing he would never truly experience what it meant to be with her? The more he thought about it, the clearer the answer became. He couldn't stand on the sidelines any longer. Watching was no longer enough. Gabriel watched him closely, as if reading his thoughts. "If you choose this path, there's no turning back, Sam. You will live and you will die, just like any other human." Sam nodded slowly. "I understand." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The wind howled around them, but the city below remained calm, unaware of the monumental choice being made high above its streets. Finally, Gabriel sighed. "It's your decision, Sam. But remember, once you fall, you will feel everything. The joy, the love, and the pain." Sam turned back toward the city, his gaze drifting to the hospital where Emily would soon be starting another shift. He thought about her smile, her laugh, her quiet moments of sadness. He thought about the life he had been observing for so long, the life he was finally ready to live. "I've watched long enough," Sam said softly, his voice filled with quiet resolve. "I'm ready to feel." Gabriel nodded, though his eyes were filled with sadness. "Then you know what you must do." Without another word, Gabriel disappeared, leaving Sam alone on the rooftop. The city stretched out below him, alive with the heartbeat of a world he had only ever glimpsed from a distance. Now it was time to join it. Sam took a deep breath and stepped forward, feeling the weight of the decision settle into his very being. He wasn't afraid anymore. For the first time in his existence, he felt ready to embrace the unknown, to embrace life. And with that, he fell. The night air was thick with the scent of rain, though the sky above was clear. Sam walked quietly beside Emily as they strolled through the park, the sound of their footsteps the only thing breaking the stillness. The lights from the city glowed softly in the distance, casting long shadows on the path. It had been a long day for both of them. Emily had spent hours in the hospital, and Sam had spent the day by her side, though she didn't know it. But now, as they walked together, Sam knew that something was different. The decision he had made, the one that had been growing inside him for days, was now fully formed. Tonight, everything would change. Emily sighed softly, breaking the silence. "Do you ever wonder if you're missing something?" she asked, her voice quiet but heavy with the weight of her thoughts. Sam glanced at her, his heart aching at the sadness in her tone. "What do you mean?" he asked, though he already knew. Emily stopped walking and turned to face him, her eyes searching his. "I mean, I have this life, this job that I love. I help people. I save lives. But at the end of the day, when I go home," she paused, her voice catching slightly, "it still feels empty, like there's something more I'm supposed to find, but I don't know what it is." Sam's chest tightened. He knew exactly what she was feeling, because he had felt it too. This longing for something deeper, something more than just observing life. He had spent so long watching from the sidelines, but now, standing in front of Emily, he realized that he wanted to be a part of it. He wanted to experience everything she was talking about. The joy, the love, the pain, and the uncertainty. "Maybe what you're missing is the part that makes life real," Sam said softly, his eyes locking onto hers. "The part where you take risks, where you let yourself feel everything, even when it's hard." Emily looked at him, her brow furrowing slightly. "How do you always know the right thing to say?" she asked, half joking but also deeply curious. Sam smiled, though it was bittersweet. Maybe because I've spent so much time watching people live their lives. I've seen what makes them happy, what makes them sad, but I've never felt any of it. Emily tilted her head slightly confused. What do you mean? Sam took a deep breath. This was the moment where he had to tell her the truth, or at least a version of it. Emily, there's something you don't know about me, he said quietly. I haven't been completely honest with you. Emily frowned, her concern growing. What are you talking about? Sam hesitated for just a moment before continuing. I'm not like other people. I've been watching from a distance for a long time. I've never really lived the way you do. I've never experienced the things you talk about. Love, happiness, even pain. I've only observed. Emily's eyes softened as she listened, but Sam could see the confusion in them. But why? She asked. Why would you live like that? Because it's all I've ever known, Sam replied. But now I want something different. I want to feel everything you feel. I want to live, really live, even if it means losing everything I've ever known. Emily stared at him, her eyes wide with understanding. You're talking like you've been living in another world, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Like you're not human. Sam didn't answer right away. He couldn't tell her the whole truth, not yet, but he needed her to understand how much this choice meant to him. All I know is that I want to be with you, Emily. Not just as a watcher, but as someone who can feel what you feel, who can share in the life you live. Emily took a step closer to him, her eyes never leaving his. And what happens if you do? She asked softly. What happens if you choose to feel everything? Sam's heart pounded in his chest. Then I'll be just like you, he said, his voice full of quiet certainty. I'll live, I'll love, and I'll lose. But I'll be free to experience it all. With you. For a long moment they just stood there, the weight of Sam's words hanging between them. Emily's eyes filled with emotion, and Sam could see the depth of her own longing reflected back at him. She wanted this too, this connection, this life full of everything that made being human so complex and beautiful. Finally, Emily reached out and took Sam's hand in hers, her touch warm and real. Then take that leap, she whispered, her voice filled with hope. Be with me. Be real. Sam's heart swelled with emotion, and in that moment he knew he had made his decision. He had watched for long enough. Now it was time to live. The next morning, Sam woke to the soft warmth of sunlight streaming through a window. He blinked, confused at first, before realizing where he was. Inside a small apartment, lying on a simple bed. He sat up slowly, feeling the weight of the blankets against his skin, the softness of the mattress beneath him. It was also different, and then he felt it, the warmth of the sun on his face. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced before. Real, tangible, alive. Sam closed his eyes, letting the sensation wash over him. For the first time in his existence, he felt the world around him in all its fullness. He was human. The realization hit him like a wave, but it wasn't overwhelming. Instead, it was peaceful, like stepping into a new reality where everything was more vibrant, more meaningful. He wasn't just watching anymore, he was living. A soft knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. The door creaked open, and Emily stepped inside, a gentle smile on her face. Good morning, she said softly, her eyes filled with warmth. How are you feeling? Sam smiled, the sensation of happiness filling him completely. I'm feeling alive, he said, his voice full of wonder. Emily laughed lightly and walked over to him, sitting on the edge of the bed. You look different, she said, studying him carefully. But in a good way. Sam reached out, taking her hand in his. The warmth of her skin against his was the most real thing he had ever felt. I made my choice, he said quietly, and I don't regret it. Emily smiled, her eyes shining with emotion. Neither do I. Together they sat there in the quiet morning light, no longer bound by the invisible world of angels, but free to experience all the beauty and challenges of human life. And for the first time, Sam felt that he truly belonged.